Welcome to Knowledgeable Aging. I'm your host, Jason Kotar. Join us today to talk about Take Control, Organizing Caregiver Chaos is Christy Pickrell. Christy is the founder and president of Our Little Peace of Mind, where she creates solutions for care coordination for individuals and families. She has been in the caregiving field for 30 plus years, starting with family members as well as respite provider for the ARC of Maryland. She is a mother of a 22-year-old disabled son and wife of 29 years. Christy has been published in the Autism Parenting Magazine as well as 50 Plus Lifestyle Magazine and writes a regular column for GiversGuides magazine out of Honolulu called Ask Christy. How are you doing today, Christy?
Hi, Jason. I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. I am going to go ahead and turn it over to you. Take Control, Organizing Caregiver Chaos.
I'm Christy, and I want to come in today and talk to you about taking control of organizing caregiver chaos. So what do I mean by caregiver chaos? I'm talking about all those overwhelming feelings, those buried in paperwork, worried, too many appointments, trying to coordinate everything for you or a loved one when you're newly diagnosed. And I can tell you this because I've been there. I want to tell you a little bit about my story before we get started. This is my son, Russell. He's an adult, he's 22. He was diagnosed very young with autism. But before that, I was a caregiver for my grandmother when I was in my teens. She was bedridden from a car accident in 1941. And I came in on weekends and school holidays and worked with my grandfather to help take care of her because he couldn't get a break. She couldn't be left alone for more than a couple hours, and she really needed constant care, not to mention all the medicines that she was taking and everything that needed to be coordinated. So I've been caring for loved ones, like I said, for over 30 years. And I've learned a lot of little tricks and tidbits along the way. And so I know many of you out there are just so overwhelmed and worried, and you're just, where do I begin? Where do I start? You know, there's so much going on with us, you know, in our mind when a loved one is diagnosed, or when even you're diagnosed with a health issue. So one of the things I like to say is I like to call it peace of mind. We're going to talk a lot about peace of mind. So what do I mean by peace? I mean P for plan, educate, advocate, communicate, and engage. And sorry. And so as we go through these 5 steps, you're going to see little tricks that I've learned throughout the years, things that I have found that help myself as well as help the loved one that I'm working with. So the first piece is plan. Plan everything. I know this diagnosis was not planned, but you can start by, organizing. The first thing I recommend is get a calendar and a notebook, because the doctors are going to give you so much information and there's going to be so much to do. You're not going to remember everything. So write it down, because you're going to want to coordinate with loved ones later, and you're going to want to share information about what's going on. And I guarantee you're not going to remember everything the doctor said. The other thing is put everything in one place, whether that be a file box or a binder. Put it all in one place, because you're going to want to refer back to those pamphlets that the doctors are giving you and all the information that's being thrown at you at first. And you're not going to have time to deal with it all at once. So you really want to just get it all corralled in one place.
Christy, I want to continue along the organization and the planning that you have talked about here. How specific should somebody be when it comes to their notes and the calendars? And also specificity, yes, but how often should they be updating this information?
I know when I was caring for my grandmother when I was young, it was an hourly notebook.
Okay.
I mean, it was from dosing pain medicine to tracking what she ate to who did what chores to help her out. You know, it was the notebook is really constant because we wanted to make sure that my grandfather and I were on the same page. You know, we didn't want to over medicate her. We didn't want to miss something. So really we wanted to kind of keep track of what we did with her. And we do that with my son too. It's, you know, we have a checklist every day. You know, he got his medicine. He got his shower. You know, he had therapy today. You know, because these are things that if I'm not here, you know, his dad needs to know, or his or, you know, the next caregiver coming in needs to know. You know, I can't be there 24/7. So getting it all down on that piece of paper and in that notebook makes all of us a better caregiver.
Yeah.
Because we're coordinating and we're communicating.
Last question on this planning. I'm curious about the organization with regards to type of documents. Obviously, you've got advanced directives, medical power of attorneys. I assume
Yeah.
all of these scheduling, legal documents, all of these documents are put into this
So
notebook or this
with
binder?
our kids, we start with the day-to-day knowledge. We start with the day-to-day stuff. We have what we call a working kit, and it's for the diabetes patient that has to track their sugar and insulin every day. You know, it's writing down those sugar, you know, and the insulin dose that they're taking. You know, we all know when we're diagnosed with high blood pressure or diabetes or pre-diabetic, the doctor is going to hand you this chart or a piece of paper and say, track this and bring it back to me. How many times do we lose that piece of paper? By getting it in a binder and, you know, in its own place, we know where it is at all times. We have less likely to forget it when we're going back to those doctor's appointments. You know, that information is so important for our doctors to know so that they can care for us. So having it all in a daily working notebook or a binder is so valuable. So the next piece of this is educate. When I say educate, I'm talking about you want to ask a ton of questions. And keep that notebook handy because you're going to want to write those answers down. And you may think of a question hours after you leave the doctor's office or hours after you talk to that service provider. Write it down so that you remember to ask it next time. When my son was diagnosed with epilepsy, on top of the autism, I had a million questions. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to turn. So ask those questions and do your research. You know, research everything out there that you can find. The other thing is there are so many resources and services out there, whether you're a child with autism or an adult with Alzheimer's or dementia. There are so many services out there that can be tapped into. For Medicare, you've got your aging and disability. You can go to your state and there's respite services, there's literacy, there's all kinds of information out there. You just need to research.
So I want to talk a little bit about research. Obviously, the internet is a wonderful place for information, but it also can be a scary place. You've heard the term Dr. Google. How do you recommend an individual that's taking care of either themselves or a loved one, whether that loved one is local or far away? How do they make sure that the information they're consuming on the internet is actually beneficial and not harmful?
Talk to your doctor. Share what you are learning with your doctor. You know, epilepsy, when my son was diagnosed with epilepsy, came out of nowhere. Scared everybody. But take what your doctor is giving you and, you know, go to those. Your doctor is going to give you a pamphlet. Your doctor is going to give you resources. You know, when you find other resources, talk to your doctor about it. Really coordinate, you know, and ask questions. That's where that ask questions come in. You know, you find something on the internet and you don't know, is it true? Is it not true? WebMD, Google Doctor, you know, there's so much information out there. You know, we say do our research, but we also want you to take that research back and ask questions about it. You know, really coordinate with your doctor and ask them. The research is really so that you know what questions to ask and what resources are out there. So coordinate everything. I mean, that's why C is coordinate and communicate. You know, really, you know, ask questions. Use the internet, but be careful. You know, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. We all know that. Mm-hmm. But use the research you find and ask your doctor about
it. If somebody, what do you say to those individuals that get this information, but they are fearful that they don't have as much time with the doctor and they have too many questions? How does somebody, you know, educate themselves but go in to see their doctor with the right questions as opposed to just going in with, you know, 50 different things?
Multiple sources is what I do. When I'm researching something with my son or researching, you know, researching services or researching a program, you know, get it from multiple sources. You know, try to validate that research with information your doctor's given you. Your doctor's going to give you all kinds of pamphlets. The doctor's office is going to be able to tell you where to look for resources. You know, follow up with your PA, your physician's assistant, follow up with your nurses. You know, they're going to be the doctor. You're not going to get as much time with the doctor as you want, but you can coordinate with their offices and, you know, so just try to keep an open mind about the internet, but you know, there's so much misinformation out there too, and that's scary for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But just share the research with your doctor. And I tell everybody to research it because it comes to the next point, which is advocate. You are your advocate. You're your own advocate. You're your loved one's advocate. So go back to those asking questions. Use your voice. Don't be afraid to speak up if something doesn't sound right. Don't be afraid to say, no, I want a second opinion. Don't be afraid to use your voice, because if we don't use our voice, no one else is going to. You know, you've got to take it, and it helps you take control of the situation. The other thing is fight for services. Just because somebody tells you no doesn't mean it's a no. Ask again, ask multiple times, and share everything. Your first line of defense with your diagnosis is advocating for yourself, sharing those information, sharing the side effects, sharing, behaviors, sharing things that are affecting your care. Share it with the doctors, share it with the caregivers, share it with everybody.
How do you define advocacy?
Advocacy to me is, this is kind of a personal thing for me, because advocacy for me is fighting for my son. I am his voice. My son is nonverbal. So I'm his voice. I am his first line of defense against everything. So I define advocacy as educating myself and fighting for him. Whether it was him or my grandmother, advocacy is really telling those stories about your loved one. My advocacy of communicating for my grandmother when she couldn't communicate with her nursing staff, getting those stories and, really fighting for the loved one, yourself or your loved one. So, advocacy can be a million different things.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's me being the voice of a loved one.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I want to follow up with you on advocacy. I want to stay with advocacy for a while because it's fascinating. Thank you for your perspective. For all these years with your family members, is the idea of a loved one or a caregiver that doesn't live with somebody. So how does this is say I have a loved one that's, like you said, 1,000 miles away. How do you recommend somebody be an advocate for that family member when they don't live there?
Stay involved, ask questions, support the ones that are the frontline caregivers. With my grandmother, excuse me, it was all about supporting her, and we all had her best interest at heart. But I know I was 1,000 miles away, and I couldn't take on everything that needed to be taken on with her. So my job was to support my aunts and my dad in any way I could support them and do what I could. For me, it was sending little care packages that made my grandmother happy. It was, when I was there, being proactive and giving my aunts or my dad a break. Coming in, I cannot tell you how valuable it is when you're a frontline caregiver for somebody to come in and say, go take some time for yourself. I've got this.
Mm-hmm.
Support where you can. And just be a support system. It may, and maybe all you can do is give them a day every 6 months or something when you come into town, but give those frontline caregivers that day. It's so important to support each other, because you're all fighting for the same thing. You're
Right.
all advocating for the same reason. You want that loved one to be taken care of. So support each other.
Yeah. If somebody staying with this long distance caregiver, what should somebody be thinking about when it comes to potentially hiring a professional advocate? there's a lot of different fields when it comes to that advocacy. So what does that look like?
Find somebody that specializes in what you need.
Okay.
Find an advocate that knows special education. Find an advocate that knows dementia. Find an advocate that knows cancer. Really try to find somebody specialized, because there are so many little idiosyncrasies with each disability or diagnosis that you really want to find somebody that knows or that has personal experience with what they're advocating for.
Yeah. Last question about advocacy. When it comes to hospitals, what do you recommend? Are there any tips or anything like that you can provide somebody when it comes to a loved one that's in the hospital and making sure that like you said, you're fighting for the services of your loved one?
Remember, when you're dealing with hospital staff, you're not the only patient. Those frontline caregivers got 10 other patients too. Mm-hmm. So it really always goes back to supporting your frontline caregivers. If you take care of your frontline caregivers, my experience is they're going to take care of your loved one. So appreciate those frontline, caregivers, and appreciate that you're not their only patient. I have experience from both sides because I was a respite provider for the ARC of Maryland. Because I worked with families, with other that were not my family, that were not my children or, my loved one, having patience with them. And, it's okay. You want to fight for services at the hospital. But I personally have always found that if I support the frontline workers that are working with my grandmother or my son, and Russell or my grandmother got better care. The next piece of this is communicate. Communication is probably the second biggest thing besides getting organized, because you're going to need to communicate to coordinate care. You're going to need to coordinate and communicate with doctors, with multiple doctors. And those doctors are going to need to know what symptoms you're having and what is going on with you, because they're not at home with you 24/7. They see you in the office, but they need to know everything. And get family involved, get support. It's so important to get other family members involved. Did you know that 30% of caregivers die before the person they're caring for? You want to get help and support. You want to get family involved and share information, because as a caregiver, especially with, an elderly dementia or Alzheimer's, or like my nonverbal son, I need a break and I need somebody to come in and help me. So you need to communicate those needs with other ones.
I know you had mentioned the communicate.
Uh-huh.
Is there a difference between coordination and communication when it comes to your loved one?
To me, I don't think you can do one without the other.
Okay.
When you've got to communicate to be able to coordinate, whether you're coordinating with doctors, whether you're coordinating with a fellow family member, whether you're talking to another caregiver, it all comes down to communication. if that baseline communication is not there, or that baseline tracking system, or that notebook is not there, it really makes coordinating hard, because you really need to know what each other's doing. Coordinating and communicating with each other makes situations a lot smoother. They make transitions easier. It makes, doctors' jobs easier. If we're able to communicate and coordinate with our doctors, the symptoms that we're having during cancer treatments, the stories, with this assisted living, or the nurses that are working with our loved ones. We've got to be able to coordinate what's going on in the everyday world with what the doctors are seeing that 1 hour they're with them once a month.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've got to be able to communicate to coordinate.
Yeah. When you say get family involved, are we talking a certain number of family members, or how does that look as far as the family dynamic and communicating with them when it comes to your loved one?
I know everybody's family is not ideal. Like with me, I was 1,000 miles away with my grandmother. But if somebody wants to get involved and help with your loved one, it only enhances the situation, and it only offers you more support. By coordinating and sharing information with family members, you keep them involved and keep everybody validated, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I wasn't there day to day with my grandmother, but that doesn't mean I didn't want to know what was going on with her. And I didn't want to support where I could. So by sharing and getting family members involved and communicating what was going on with my grandmother through my dad or through my aunt, it all allowed us to make every interaction with my grandmother more memorable, more important, easier. I remember feeling helpless with my grandmother towards the end. But, because I wasn't there day to day, and I wasn't there, but when I could, I went out there and I gave my aunt that break. And I communicated with the nurses and doctors what I was seeing, and I communicated it with my aunt or my dad or whoever was taking care of her, sharing information about what we were seeing and stories we remembered, made us all better caregivers. And it made me feel better for having some involvement, because it was really difficult when I only got to see my grandmother every 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
But by my aunts and my mom and dad and everybody sharing information with us, I felt like I was a part of it. Felt like I could help where I could help. And I really felt like I made a difference. I would get a call and they would say, "Oh, she got your care package today. She was so excited." But because I coordinated that with my aunt, I was able to make those care packages count. And then engage. Ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Nobody out there is alone. We all are going through this journey together, and you really just communicate those needs to whether your partner, your spouse, your sister, your brother, communicate those needs and don't be afraid to ask for help. Get involved with support groups. There are so many support groups out there. There are so many people that want to help, and there's so many services out there that people don't know about, and that goes back to our educate. Really educate yourself and don't be afraid. The other thing I like to talk about is share your story. And I say this because you never know when your story is going to help somebody else. I share my story because I just really feel like if I can touch one person's life and I can help one person by the journey I've been through, then I feel like I've made a difference, and that, I've helped somebody else. And that goes back to advocating and all of those, the steps through this journey. Sometimes you just need a shoulder to shoulder, so get engaged, find those support groups. We all need that peace of mind.
I'd like to stay with engage for a few minutes. Support groups. Obviously, the internet now does provide online support groups. If somebody is looking to get involvement and the support groups, what should the expectation be for somebody doing an in-person versus an online?
To me, the support groups, their first priority needs to be supporting the members, and supporting each other. When I go into support groups, I am looking for somebody to validate my feelings and somebody to share in my journey and somebody to understand. So I always look for groups that encourage sharing and encourage helping each other. Whether it be in person or online, I look for groups that encourage the caregiver or encourage you as a person and validate your feelings. Because we're all dealing with a whole lot of emotion, and we're, all dealing with so many different balls in the air with caregiving. Support groups should be that. They should be supporting, and they should be uplifting, and they should be understanding. And so that's what I look for.
Yeah.
It's going to encourage.
Okay. Is there a right or wrong way to share your story?
That's a hard one, Jason. I think that I share my story because I want to help others. Mm-hmm. I think sharing your story should be about helping and healing. A lot of times people share their story because they just need to get it off their chest. And in the support groups, we need that. That's validation. We need that as a caregiver. We also need to learn as a caregiver. And by sharing our story, we can talk to each other and we can help each other get past a difficult time. And we can maybe learn something we didn't know. I share my story with different support groups for my son or with my grandmother, and it's because I'm wanting to learn as much as I want to share. And I be open to learning, which goes back to that educate, be willing to educate yourself. and, you know, share your story, but be open to new ideas. Does that make sense, Jason?
It does. It does. It does.
So that's kind of, you know, there's not just one way to do something.
Right.
And being open to new ideas might make you a better caregiver.
Why is it that many of us, many caregivers, don't ask for help?
I think a lot of us are afraid that we're going to be told no. I think a lot of us think that we have to do it on our own. I think, you know, as a mom or a daughter or a granddaughter, you know, we think it's on us and we need to be strong and we need to do that and we need to take care of our loved one and we need to be there for them. But we also need to remember that it's okay to ask for help, because asking for help is not a failure. Asking for help is not, you know, it's not because we don't want to do it. It's not, you know, asking for help is actually a good thing. You're acknowledging your needs as well. And as a caregiver, you need to take care of you too, because without taking care of you, you can't be on top of your game all the time. So asking for help makes you a better caregiver, because it gives you a much needed break.
There has to be
We
a level
all
of
need
self-care, right?
With
Yeah,
self-care. Yeah, you've got to take care of yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself, if something happens to you, what happens to the one you've been caring for?
Yeah.
So it all starts with self-care and asking for help and being willing to accept help.
Self-care doesn't have to be much, right? It could just be a little getaway. It's calling a family member saying, hey, I need 20 minutes here or there, right? It doesn't have to be,
it doesn't have to be an all-day thing.
Right.
It could be a phone call to a friend just to have somebody listen.
Right.
You know, help comes in many different shapes and forms.
Yeah.
It could be getting help providing meals, you know, asking a family member to provide one meal a week for your loved one. You know, just those little things. You know, there's many different ways people can get involved and help you care for your loved one.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the organization, the changes that you've seen from when you were taking care or assisting with an aging relative and now with your son. How has the organization changed as far as you?
It really has changed drastically. In the days of the my charts and everybody has their, you know, each doctor has their own charting system, and there's so much virtual stuff out there now than there was when I was caring for my grandmother. When I would go in and take care of my grandpa, or take care of my grandma, helping my grandpa out, you know, we tracked everything on a piece of paper. And we, you know, it's kind of where I learned my first, you know, piece of advocacy was, you know, sharing information between my grandfather and I about medicines that my grandmother was taking and resources. Oh my, I cannot even begin to tell you how much more resources there are out there now, and how much easier it is to access. I remember when I was caring for my grandmother, you know, just getting her to and from the doctor was it was a whole ordeal in itself, just getting her to the doctor. And today we have the virtual visits and things. I remember my grandmother being in so much pain when they would take her via ambulance to the doctor. And now with the virtual appointments and everything, I think it's just so much easier. The information that's out there and the services that are out there, and it's really changed over the last 30 years.
Right. I want to stay with organization for a little while with you.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the my charts and the digital. How does somebody balance the organization with putting it in writing and saving it somewhere versus the digital aspect of it?
Well, I think, we all love the convenience of the digital and we love having the charts, but I'll be honest with you, there is nothing better than having that printed out and at your fingertips, because I know in different situations, whether it be my grandmother or my son, if something happened and we had to call a paramedic, I know I didn't have the functionality. You're in that emergency situation and you don't remember every vitamin, every medicine they're taking, but having it organized in your home and right there at your fingertips, will prevent all kinds of drug interactions. It will prevent, missteps with the paramedics. They know, if we have all that information right there, then they have all the information and they can be a better paramedic to a loved one.
Speaking of paramedics, where is it recommended that your information is stored in case of an emergency?
Well, for me personally, I have a binder, and I have a binder that has all of Russell's doctors. It has all of his medicines listed. It has his diagnosis. Everything is in a binder, and we keep it on the bookshelf right there by the front door. It's right there when I walk out the door to go to a doctor's appointment. It's right there if I have to call a paramedic. It's right there if a caregiver comes in and needs to know what's been going on with him. I keep a 3-ring binder, and I have everything in that binder right there by the front door on the bookshelf. You want it as easily accessible, and you want to keep it in the same place. Keep your notes. We use our medical binder to coordinate schedules. It has a copy of Russell's calendar in it. We use his medical binder to communicate with each other. And that's kind of what we did with my grandfather. Is we had a notebook and we wrote everything in that notebook down. So Grandpa could come in after, having his time and working in his garden. And when he came home, he knew what I had done. He knew, check, I had given Grandma her medicine at this point. We didn't have to worry about overdoses, because he and I were coordinating in that notebook to, know when her medicine was due and when she had taken it last and what she'd taken. So we kept everything in that notebook, and we kept it in the same spot all the time. I've worked with different clients throughout the years, and, having it all in one place, we were able to help keep a client in her home longer, because her son was out of state, was trying to get her moved to him. And by having her know where her medical binder was, nurses were able to come in and talk to her, because she was able to see all of that information and know what her schedule was and know what was happening and know who was coming in to see her, because she kept it all in the binder.
Yeah, I want to
And we
stay.
kept it in one spot.
Yeah, I want to stay with the sharing part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Who all besides your medical, your primary care or the doctors and the nurses, who else needs to be aware of where this information is?
Anybody that you trust with your care. You know, when my other grandmother had Alzheimer's, and there were lots of us involved in her care, and it was, you know, the first thing we did when she moved into the assisted living is we put a notebook in there, and everybody signed into that notebook. When they came to visit, everybody signed that notebook. Everybody looked at it. That way we knew what was going on with each other. We knew, you know, who had taken her out that day. We knew what she had been doing. So it helped us with communication with her. It helped us communicate with each other. It was just having that journal in her room, you know, it eliminated duplication, you know, it eliminated confusion because we were all on the same page. And we all checked that notebook. As soon as we walked into her assisted living, we all checked that notebook so that we knew what was going on and what had been done and what hadn't been done.
Yeah, I want to stay with the organization part, but the caregiver aspect of it. You had mentioned, apologies if I don't have this number correct, the 30% of caregivers pass before.
Yeah, 30%. It's freaky. I just recently found that out through a group that I work with, and you know, caregiving takes so much out of us, and you want to stay organized because it takes some of the stress off of you. You know, it allows you to, you know, focus on caring, and having everything organized ultimately is going to make your life easier. Because it allows you with coordinating for multiple caregivers. You know, with my grandmother with Alzheimer's, you know, there were 3 siblings and there were too many cousins to count. You know, so we all wanted to have that peace and help in our own way. But by organizing all of her information and sharing it with each other, you know, we were all able to be better caregivers to my grandmother. We were all able to, you know, kind of focus on our piece. You know, my dad used to take her for ice cream once a week. You know, and he would, and we knew, you know, whoever had been there, you know, and it also encourages communication. I know with Alzheimer's, you know, the patient doesn't always remember everything, but by coordinating and sharing that information with others, you can create more connections. You know, you create, you know, connections with your loved one. You can have conversations. You know, like my aunt used to come in after my dad had took her to ice cream, and she would engage my grandmother and, well, what did you have? You know, what did you get from the restaurant? What kind of ice cream did you get? You know, just kind of engaging with the loved one. You know, we used to do, one of the things we did when my grandmother had Alzheimer's was, I'm 1,000 miles away. So it was really hard for me to be involved all the time, but I always made time to send her a care package. Well, by organizing all her information, one of the things we did is we did a photo book for her. so that when she didn't remember what the name was, she would get the package and she would see the name and she could look in her picture book and see, oh, that was Christy. Christy sent me a package. Christy's thinking about me. You know, so there's so much more to organization than just the medical piece. You know, by getting stories down on paper, you can coordinate care that way. You know,
what do you recommend as far as this organization? How soon, once somebody has this diagnosis or a loved one has a diagnosis, how soon should that start?
As soon as you can. Get those stories down. You know, one of the things with my grandmother was when she did make the transition from the assisted living into the nursing home piece, it was because of an injury. She had broken her hip, and we all know with dementia and Alzheimer's, you know, that's any kind of injury or health condition can cause more memory problems. Mm-hmm. Well, I went into the nursing home to see her, and we were all kind of coordinating and taking turns. Well, I went in and she was having a disagreement with the nurse, and they were not, you know, there was a little bit of conflict. She wanted to put her plate under the table. And it took me a minute, and then I realized she was trying to feed her cat. She thought her cat was there. And when I was able to communicate that story with the nurses, they were able to say, wow, you know, this is why she's doing something. And so from then on, they just gave her a little plate, you know, and she would put a little bit of food on it and put it under the table, and then she would eat her dinner. But it eliminated all of that conflict. So getting those family stories down, getting likes and dislikes, you know, down when they can remember will help when they can't, because it can help with calming them down. You know, if you know something they really, really like, you can distract them and avoid the conflict by talking about something they really like and engaging them in something that gets them excited and make that connection. And you can avoid the things that they don't like. And you can avoid the things that cause conflict, because we all know time is precious with our loved ones with Alzheimer's and dementia. And if you get all this stuff on paper and get it all organized right at the beginning, it really saves you time in the long run, because it gives you those critical time and memories down the line.
How does somebody know that the organization that they've done is actually being read, or actually by those assisted living or the doctors? How can somebody make sure that this information is actually being taken to heart?
Share, share, share. Everybody needs to share. You know, I have found with my son, and I know it sounds, you know, like, well, it's just going to add more work to them, you know, but whenever somebody comes in and works with my son, the first thing I hand them is a portfolio. And his portfolio has his likes and his dislikes and our beware section that we call it. You know, it's, you know, different stories. We include stories from other caregivers. Every person that walks in and works with my son, they get this portfolio, and they are so excited because they don't have to reinvent the wheel. You know, they have a starting point, and it's just valuable time that you are giving the caregivers or the nurses or whatever. You're giving them time and a starting point, and they are 9 times out of 10 so excited to get this information, because, you know, people really do want to help. And so, you know, by sharing these stories and getting them down, you know, as soon as you can, you're going to make life so much easier and give yourself so much more time later on.
Yeah, the thing that really resonates there is the time, right? Is the amount of time that you have now to focus on your loved one and yourself as the caregiver, as opposed to just continuing to do repetitive stuff that you've done in the past and not knowing where everything is.
Yeah, I mean, a 15-minute investment will save you hours later on. You know, just putting that pamphlet that the doctor gives you in that binder, you know, having that binder with you, just putting it in that binder or putting it in the folder, or whether even if it's a shoebox sitting by the, you know, on a shelf, having it all in one place means you're not going to spend 20 minutes searching your desk for it. You know it's going to be in that box.
Yeah. So how can people find you, Christy?
Well, okay, so I will bring up my information. We are at our www.ourlittlepeaceofmind.com, and you can email us at info@ourlittlepeaceofmind.com, or you can call us. We love to talk to people about their situation. We offer consultations with, you know, before you purchase anything with us. We, you know, I do advocacy, I do solutions. You know, sometimes my job is just being a shoulder and a little bit of advice. But I want everybody, you know, call us, book a consultation on our website. We'll call you, we'll talk to you, you know, and sometimes it's just a resource on how to get a hold of something or a service that you don't know about. You know, we want to help everybody.
How could people, what's your phone number actually, the actual phone number?
The phone number is 713-785-6827.
Okay, Christy, also, if you want to, feel free to talk about your products and services. I know you have a wealth of stuff that you know, of products and everything and services. So please, this is your time to,
Well, we do a little bit of everything.
Yes.
We create the portfolios that I've talked about with the likes and the dislikes. We create medical binders. We will sit down with you or your loved one and get all their medical information in an organized system. We kind of do a little bit of everything. If you can imagine it, we will do it. We create solutions for you and your loved ones. We create, and we do classes, we do kits, you know, we'll come out and talk to your group about our PEACE program. We will come talk to you about how to begin a medical binder. You know, how do you create a medical binder start to finish? We'll come out and teach you how to do that. You know, at Peace of Mind, we like everybody to know that we're here for you guys. We're here to share my journey to make your life easier.